The joke left my mouth before my fear could stop it, floating in the air between us like a fragile glass ornament ready to shatter, and for one terrifying second the entire office seemed to hold its breath along with my heart. It was my birthday, the kind of quiet, forgettable birthday you learn to expect once you are an adult with bills, responsibilities, and no one waiting at home with a cake. I had smiled, shrugged, tried to make it sound light and harmless, never imagining that my boss would look at me the way she did in that moment, with a softness that felt dangerous, and then smile back as if the world had just tilted slightly off its axis. That was the second everything began to change, though I had no idea how deep the change would go or how much it would cost me before it saved me. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that small moments can change entire lives, take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel The Kindness Chronicles, because stories like this remind us that the smallest sparks can light the darkest paths. Before that day, my life had been a careful routine built to survive, not to dream. I worked hard, arrived early, left late, and stayed invisible by design. Being invisible felt safer after everything I had lost. Years earlier, I had learned what it meant to have the ground disappear beneath your feet. My father had died suddenly when I was still trying to figure out who I was, leaving behind debts instead of guidance. My mother followed him not long after, worn down by grief and illness, and just like that, the world I knew collapsed into silence and responsibility. I became the kind of person who believed that love was a luxury for people with time and safety, not for someone always bracing for the next fall. Work became my shelter, and discipline my armor. The company itself was impressive from the outside, all glass walls and clean lines, but inside it was a place where pressure lived in every corner. My boss was known as brilliant, demanding, and distant. People admired her and feared her in equal measure. She had built the company from almost nothing, and her reputation was that of someone who never mixed emotions with business. To me, she was simply the person whose approval meant stability, whose disappointment could mean starting over in a world that had already taken too much. I respected her deeply, but I never imagined crossing the invisible line between employee and something more personal. That birthday morning, there had been no messages on my phone, no missed calls, no reminders that the day was supposed to matter. I dressed the same way I always did, moved through the city with the same quiet resignation, and told myself that another year older did not mean another year closer to happiness. It only meant surviving again. When my coworkers surprised me with a small cake in the break room, I felt grateful but uncomfortable, like someone shining a light on a corner I preferred to keep dark. Laughter filled the room, polite and warm, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to feel seen. Later, when my boss called me into her office, I assumed it was work-related. I stood there, hands folded, waiting for instructions. Instead, she mentioned my birthday, something I did not expect her to remember. The acknowledgement alone felt like a crack in the wall I had built around myself. I made the joke then, a reflex born from nerves and an attempt to deflect the sudden intimacy of the moment. It was meant to vanish as quickly as it appeared, dismissed as humor, something neither of us would think about again. But she did not dismiss it. Her smile was not amused in the casual way I expected. It was thoughtful, almost tender, and that was when she said the thing that rewrote the rest of my life. Not as a promise. Not as a decision, but as a possibility. In that instant, fear rushed in faster than hope. I laughed it off, retreated behind professionalism, and told myself that nothing had changed. Yet the air between us felt different, charged with something unnamed and unsettling. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken tension. I noticed small things I had trained myself to ignore before, the way her voice softened when she asked how my workload was, the way she lingered a second longer during meetings when everyone else had left. I also noticed my own heart betraying me, beating faster when she entered a room, aching with questions I was too afraid to ask. I told myself it was impossible, irresponsible, and destined to end in disaster. She was my boss, and I was someone who could not afford to lose what little stability I had. At the same time, my life outside work began to unravel in familiar ways. The apartment I lived in was barely holding together, with walls thin enough to hear other people's happiness through them. Bills stacked up faster than my paycheck could handle, and the loneliness I had learned to tolerate grew sharper, more insistent. I would sit alone at night, replaying that moment in her office, wondering why it had felt like the first honest thing I had said in years. The joke had been a mask, but behind it was a truth I had never allowed myself to face, the desire to belong to someone, to build something lasting instead of merely surviving. As weeks passed, the company faced challenges that demanded everything from all of us. A major project teetered on the edge of failure, and pressure mounted from investors and partners. Long hours blurred into sleepless nights, and exhaustion stripped away pretense. In that crucible, I saw another side of my boss, not just the decisive leader but the human being carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. I saw her doubt, her fear of letting people down, and it made her feel closer, more real. She, in turn, saw my resilience, the quiet determination that came from having already lost too much to quit easily. The unspoken connection between us deepened, not through grand gestures, but through shared moments of vulnerability. Late nights at the office became conversations about life, about the cost of ambition, about the sacrifices no one applauds. Still, neither of us crossed the line. The risk was too great, and the consequences too real. Yet the possibility lingered, growing heavier with every passing day, until pretending it did not exist became more painful than acknowledging it. The turning point came during a crisis that threatened not only the company but my own sense of worth. A mistake, not entirely mine but mine to fix, put everything at risk. I prepared myself for the worst, ready to accept blame and walk away if necessary. When I stood before her, expecting disappointment or anger, what I found instead was understanding. She stood by me, defended my work, and trusted me when others did not. That trust felt like a lifeline thrown into deep water, and it changed how I saw myself. For the first time in years, I felt chosen, not out of obligation, but belief. After the crisis passed, the silence between us could no longer hold. The weight of everything unspoken demanded release. She acknowledged the moment on my birthday, not as a joke, but as the beginning of a question neither of us had dared to answer. We talked about boundaries, about fear, about what it would mean to risk everything we had built. There was no rush, no fantasy of instant happiness, only honesty and caution and a shared understanding that real things require patience. What followed was not a fairy tale but a slow, deliberate unfolding. We navigated the complexities of our roles, the scrutiny of others, and our own insecurities. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when walking away seemed easier than staying. Yet each challenge revealed something important, that love was not the opposite of fear but something that could exist alongside it, something strong enough to make fear worth facing. Over time, my life began to look different. Not perfect, but fuller. I moved to a place that felt like a home instead of a hiding spot. I allowed myself to imagine a future that was more than survival. She learned to let someone share her burdens instead of carrying them alone. Together, we built a partnership grounded not in power or dependency, but in respect and shared growth. The joke that started it all became a reminder of how truth sometimes slips out when we least expect it, disguised as humor because we are too afraid to say it plainly. Looking back, I understand that the question I asked on my birthday was never really about marriage. It was about whether I was allowed to hope again, whether someone like me could be seen and chosen despite the scars of loss and fear. Her answer did not promise certainty, but it offered possibility, and that was enough to change everything. It taught me that kindness can come from unexpected places, that second chances are often quiet and fragile, and that courage sometimes begins with a joke spoken from a wounded heart. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the moments in your own life when you almost stayed silent, please take a second now to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and comment to let us know how it made you feel. Subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles if you believe that real love grows through patience, empathy, and the bravery to take emotional risks. And before you go, leave a comment sharing whether you believe small moments can truly change a life, because your words might be the kindness someone else needs today.